Morning and welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering current events on this year Thursday morning, Rise and Shine. And this morning here, we're looking at the topic, why were the Covington Catholic High School boys protesting abortion in Washington, D.C.? That's the Washington, D.C. part I had on to to explain what I'm talking about. So, why were the Covington Catholic High School boys protesting abortion? This is what I want to look at because I found that very fascinating as to what was going on there. Not per se the event that made it famous, but this idea here. Why were they there protesting abortion? These children. So welcome again to our live talk program. Hopefully you had a blessed night rest and you're ready to take on today. And thanks for joining with me here or listening even later on the podcast. Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, I thank you for the blessings of your word, for truth, for the instructions and the history that you gave us through Israel, that we can understand, dear Lord, when history is repeating itself. May you bless us, dear Father, we pray for Christ's sake. Amen. So, again, my topic is, why were the Covington Catholic High School boys, teenagers, protesting abortion in Washington, D.C.? Now, this I find fascinating because during the lead up, or last week in the lead up to these protests, I was reading various different issues that were going on, because there was the Women's March going on, the March for Life going on, which is what the Catholic boys were there for. And then there was the this other thing here with the Native Americans there, and then somehow got thrown in the mix more groups, 5 men that were representing the Black Hebrew Israelites. And so that became a firestorm that has been raging or talked about for the last few days, and I think it's dying down now. So after everything that's come in from day one when I heard about it, because I heard the different groups that were going and I was reading different arguments for or against or what they're protesting, whether they're protesting for just women's rights or they're protesting for abortion or whatever they're doing. I was reading different articles and different opinion pieces and just taking the information in. And then this thing happened, and then I'm fascinated, to be honest, just very curious and actually very perturbed or troubled about this thing, that they had not teenage girls but teenage boys protesting to tell women that they don't have no right to an abortion. And I might say that me particularly, I'm not taking a stance. You never heard me talk per se about pro or against abortion. It's just not one of those things that I weigh much into and say I'm going to preach sermon and go placard. So it's fascinating when they have such a strong opinion as teenagers, and there's a lot of adults that don't. And what's particular, I was trying to read a lot of information straight from the Catholic Church themselves about their stance. And at the hierarchy, at the end, the Pope and the men that are in charge that have been constantly accused of raping little kids, they are against abortion. But the people in the pew are split 40-40. I guess some people have no opinion much, but when surveyed, from what I've read, 40-something% is against all abortion under any circumstance, and 40-something% is for abortion within the church. So that got me thinking that many of the young men, mothers and sisters, have committed abortion, and so that was fascinating for them as children to be protesting. So this is what I want to talk about. So I have 2 articles, or one article, full article, another article, one addressing this issue of why they were there, just to give a little bit backdrop, because I was looking for it, because I was curious as to why were they there, because I never knew that children would go out and protest a topic like abortion. So that was new for me. Never knew that this happened in the United States, that you bring high school students, children, to protest this, especially that topic. And so I have some articles to share, or 1.5 article, and then I want to talk more about that because I find that fascinating from my point of view. So I'm going to start off by reading Matthew 23, verse 23 through 33. Let's think about 11 verses there. It says, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. These ought ye to have done, and not leave the other undone." So the weightier matter of law, according to God, when you look at the Old Testament, and when you zoom in to the Old Testament, you go to the Ten Commandments. The weightier matter of the law is not the harsh, dictatorial view on life, but is the mercy, judgment, faith. Fascinating. Now, like the Pharisees of old and the Catholic of old and the Protestants of modern time, it is this idea here that the weightier matter of the law is judgment, mercy, and faith. They have lost. Where is the protest for the mercies of those who are suffering in the society? Why is the only person, and this is this false equivalence of righteousness, that the only person they're concerned with? And as I say, I have people I see, all they talk about is abortion. And they're just concerned with the unborn and the fetus. But the people who are alive and being massacred and slaughtered and starving to death around the world, they seem to not have much concern for that. There's this false idea of I care for others. This is how I see it. So hopefully I didn't lose anybody here on that. So omit the weightier matter of the law. This is what Christ is saying. So somebody say, well, I thought the weightier matter of the law is you should not. Thou shalt not. Well, yeah, but if you look at that, it might seem that way. This is why Christ had to clarify. God himself, who is the author of life and death, he's the one that alters all that. He's the one that makes the system that is ability to die. He's the one that created hell, not you and I. He's the one that says the weightier matter of when you read the Old Testament, you read the Ten Commandments. There's a weighty matter in there that is heavier than I'm taking a stand. And I'm the one that is more morally unjust. And we see that with Adam and Eve real quickly. Adam and Eve sinned, and God could have come in and killed them. And God showed that he leans on the side of mercy for sinners, more than sinners themselves. When you look in the Ten Commandments, the Bible says he will cut off curse upon a family because of their parents after the third and fourth generation. That's right there in the law. That's the weightier matter of the law. Somebody say, I thought it was like there's a curse there for people who rebel. Yeah, but for a third and fourth generation. But God says, I'll bless those who are righteous and bless their children and their children's children after that for many generations. Missing my quote there, but many generations. So right there tells you that God will extend the blessing upon a person and another person based upon what one person did. If further down the road, then he will extend the curse. He will cut the curse off and say, look, I don't want too many after this person who don't even know this person to suffer from their foreparents' mistakes. That's what the Bible teaches. The Sabbath is mercy, judgment, and faith. The thou shalt not murder. If you look at the commandment, somebody could say, oh no, the commandment is restricted if you have lost your salvation or you're a lost individual. But if you read the commandments are beautiful and kind, because thou shalt not murder is not restrictive, it's protection for me and you. Honor thy father and mother. Honor. That is mercy. That is love. That is faith. See, when you're led by the devil, you see the commandments as hateful and terrible. But when you're led by the Lord, you start to see the beauty in the commandment. You start to see God is right. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor. Don't kill. Don't steal. Don't rape. Don't do anything. All the commandments is mercy, is judgment, and the commandment is a loving document. Depends when you're looking at it. But when you're a sinner, you see the restriction as hate, because you want to do evil. But when you get out of that evil mindset, you start to see the restriction as loving. And so why is this important for the march against abortion? Because some people have this mindset that if it would be better for a woman to die, suffer, the child to come out with deformities where they're missing a brain and stuff like that, and suffer through the rest of their life until they die. And it satisfies them. And they say, yes, under no circumstances there should be any abortion. And it tells you that they're not leaning on the side of mercy. Again, we're not for free sex. We're not for the people who sleep around. We're not for people getting pregnant and can't take care of the kids. We're not for all of that. But at the end of the day, mercy is always what governs our behavior and our choices. And to see people suffering in pain, sick, people starving to death. Look at the places that Catholic Church has a big hold, and you find this is the environment that the people live in, because they have an opinion where no protection, no condoms, no contraception, and they just have, people could have 10, 20, 30 kids, and that's great because that will swell the church. But the suffering and the crimes and all these things that goes on, you say, where's the love? Where's the mercy? So when we read the Ten Commandments, we are commandment keepers, but the commandment speaks differently to us. Just like the Bible always say, when God speaks, evildoers hear thundering, but the righteous hear the words of God. When we read a commandment, it's filled with mercy, it's filled with judgment, it's filled with faith. We love the commandment. To me, thou shalt not bow down before graven image. That's a beautiful thing. Why do you want to bow down to a carved image? It's stupid. It's just silliness. It's idiocy. I don't matter what race or group bows down to this day to carve an image. It's nonsensical. You bow down and praying to a dumb inanimate object as a god. That to me is mercy. That to me is judgment, and that to me is faith. And so we love the commandments, and we are proud of it. And this is something that I'm glad that, Lord, I've changed my mind. So I see the beauty in the Ten Commandments. So again, because I see the beauty in the Ten Commandments, I see God as a God of love, God is very merciful and kind to sinners. And I don't believe that, again, somebody should be forced to, be like, again, how do I say this? People who have a big problem with incest and rape in their community should be out there protesting, telling women that they need to keep the child after they've been raped and after incest has happened and all that type of stuff. I'm not going to be one to be pounding my chest and say, yeah, I have the moral platitude to tell somebody who's been raped and incest and all that type of stuff, and somebody who have an ectopic pregnancy, they call it, or uterine cancer, that, yeah, you must keep a child, or a child so deformed that it comes out as a stillbirth. These are what they're saying. I say, if you don't do this, you're not moral. But they do it, and they're saying, yeah, we moral because we do this. It's a false equivalence. So I'm going to read the rest of it, and I'm going to go to the article. Notice it says here, ye blind guides, with strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. I want you to think about that. Strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. And there's two texts in the Bible that is used to do this. And I say this up front. Two texts in the Bible. There's two texts in the Bible that I know clearly seemed like he's dealing with abortion. Now, one text is a text that talks about, and I forget the quote here, the link here, and because I just came to my mind, I said, let me just say this to you. One text talk about if you accidentally hit a woman, I think it's in Leviticus, if you accidentally hit a woman and she loses the child, it is viewed as a major, it's a crime. So they say that's an anti-abortion text. That's the one text. I think Tertullian, the theologians, came up with this concept and said, yes, this is an abortion text. So this is telling you something that happened by accident the Bible is talking about. Or you get into an argument and something happened. They say, well, this is a text to prove that you should not commit abortion. Remember now, the person did not intend to, or it's an accident, or whatever the reason is. How that is what we're talking about, strength and not on a camel. There's another text that deals with abortion, and these are the two I know. There might be more. I haven't found it yet. There's another text, and it's a text that says that if a man has a wife and he thinks the wife cheats on her, that he should go to the priest, and the priest should give her a formula to drink, and most such if she drink the formula, and there was a child, it would evacuate the child. So those two texts are like, we call it, they're contradictory. And I leave it at that. Those are the two texts. I don't see how you form a major doctrine over the two texts. But if you go to the same people, you say, hey, what do you believe about the Sabbath? They're like, oh, we don't know. We believe Sunday is a day to worship. But then you have these two contradictory texts. And one is saying the priest should give a woman a formula for her to drink. And, and another next text is saying that if you cause an abortion by accident. And so I leave it to you. I don't find a text. And I've read probably most of what Ellen G. White ever wrote. I don't find her making this issue a hot button major issue or talk about the issue. So it is one of these issues that the Bible doesn't have a clear definition on. I don't find Ellen G. White. And if you do, you send me the text, send me the Spirit of Prophecy quote. I'd like to read that. So we continue there, and probably this is something I should have said in the end, just in case I lose somebody who's listening, and they're so far against abortion that they're like, I don't want to hear it because this guy is not. I'm not really for or against. I'm just simply saying I haven't found the major power or force or energy to be for or against. I'm not there. And some people think you must be there, so you're not righteous. And that's the only righteousness that they have and preach. And this is where my problem is. Now, verse 25 says, woe unto you, scribe and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you make clean outside of the cup and of the platter, but within are full of extortion and excess. Thou blind Pharisees, cleanse first that which is within the cup and platter, and that the outside of them may be clean also. So this is important to the topic. Again, cleanse the inside and then the outside will automatically be clean. If only preaching you're doing and teaching is just these outward preaching, look good, sound good, but not be good inside, you're not going to fix the problem. And the problem is going to keep going on. Notice here it says here, woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrite, for you are like whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men bones and are of uncleanness. Think about it. The number one church that is known historically and currently for rape, incest, and all these things is the number one church to be anti-abortion. It is very strange. Again, they always say sometimes be careful of ignorant people in a crowd that are making noise. People who are more even morally astute or morally cleansed are not going around and every day, oh yeah, look at these kids being raped, look at these abortion, look at these things. But people who are known, this is not my judgment, this is not my opinion, this is what all the news reports constantly come out, that the environment that is filled with the most rape of the boys and the girls and incest and all these things is the people that is most anti the thing. The people that is in the society that talk from all the years I've lived in my life, and I've talked to Catholics, that they will look at somebody like me and say, I can't go to your church, man, it's too strict. I need to bleep, vagina. I need to drink. I need to do this. I need to do that. And then they're going to turn around to me, but I'm against abortion. And I'm like, really? And so you're more righteous because you're against this one thing, but your lifestyle is so sadistic and immoral. And you would tell me, no, I couldn't do what you do, man. Your religion is too restrictive. I need to be free to have sex with all the women I want to do. And that's what I've been told. This is not me. I'm quoting here, and I'm quoting nicely. So how now you're going to come to me and say, well, you're preaching and you're teaching and all the things that you do, but there's one issue, and that's what makes you righteous. And you're willing to go and tell these women that no matter how much they're raped and sodomized and all that, they need to shut up and put up. Strange. Notice here verse 28, even so ye also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you build the tombs of prophets and garnish the sepulchre of the righteous. Now, I find this interesting because This is another thing I didn't know. I didn't know that on the Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, that people be going to protest, and what they're protesting is this issue. This is another thing that has surprised me. Like, surprise! I was like fascinating. So the weekend when the main talk should be about like civil rights and all these other things, we're talking about not what the Native Americans went through, what the blacks went through, what the people from Honduras and Guatemala are going through, what the Venezuelan government or what's going on in the Venezuelan political system and so forth, and all the refugees being created in Venezuela as they're being pushed to a civil war or something like that. We're not talking about that. We're not protesting that. What we're protesting is that we're going to make this effort to bring these boys on a field trip for them to protest women having abortion. This is, to me, is very strange. So notice again, woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrite, because you build the tombs of the prophet and garnish the sepulchre of the righteous. Remember, this weekend gone, the president, Leah Reid, at Martin Luther King Jr. Shrine, or whatever you call it, I don't even know what you call it, statue. Again, I don't. This is like fulfilling the Bible. You kill the prophets. I'm not saying he's a prophet, but you kill those who came and preached truth to power, so to speak. And then you garnish the sepulchre. And then your speech is hate for Mexicans, hate for blacks, hate for everything. The group that is see the presidency as the most threat to themselves are black Americans, brown people. And yet you go on that weekend and you're not protesting the ills that are happening to people who are minorities. You're protesting the event that is the most major event to me amongst Catholics. Because as I say, somebody could hear me in the first few minutes and think, I'm against abortion. Nope. I'm for abortion. Nope. It's as I say, I don't hold those opinions. But I just observe people who, they say people who are loud and always screaming. I listen to them. I hear their arguments. And I'm like, okay, so you go and you're protesting this thing. But when you look at the group that is most, when it comes on to these type of fornication and sodomy and stuff like that, how are you going to be the biggest one to be shouting at others and you're going to tell me? How are you going to be telling me this is right and this is wrong, where you're not living a lifestyle I'm living? You're going to be the loudest voice. Just in case you misunderstand what I just said, you're going to be the loudest voice telling me that you are the one that is most against the results of fornication, why you're not living that life. And I'm living a moral life when it comes on to sexual indiscretions and stuff like that. You're gonna be louder than me, and that's gonna make you righteous. How is that so? This is where it's weird. You're gonna be making black people and poor people scared, and then you're gonna tell me that says you're gonna lay a wreath at the shrine of Martin Luther King Jr. Because why? So notice here, they garnish the sepulchre of the righteous and say, if we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. This is something I hear often. People say, well, I wasn't there. I didn't kill no Native Americans. I didn't enslave black people. I didn't do Jim Crow. I wasn't part of the war on drugs to destroy the life of so many blacks in the inner city with crack and stuff like that. I wasn't there. This is what they'll say. But look at what's going on in so many countries. Look at what's going on in Honduras, Guatemala, whatever. The oppression continues. Look at what's going on in Venezuela. That pressure continues. But where were this young man to say we're going to go to Washington and protest the actions that this country is doing against Venezuela, against Honduras, against these other countries, against Syria, creating all these refugees? So there's dead bodies being piled up by the babies that made it. But the babies that didn't make it is the only one you're concerned. Well, how about concern for the babies that didn't make it, that did make it? and now they're refugees and they're on the border and they're seeking help. Notice here, wherefore you be witness unto yourself that ye are the children of them which killed the prophet. The action tells me that is hypocrisy. Fill ye up then the measure of your fathers. You serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell? So I believe it was beautiful, because if this event didn't happen, I would be one of the millions and millions of people that did not know that they bring teenage boys, probably 15 through 18, to tell women that they have no right for abortion if they have an ectopic pregnancy, or they have a uterine cancer, or if they have been raped, or they've been incest, or whatever the reason. Because I'm not a female, and that's one of the other reasons why I don't try to jump deep into it. Like you hear me talking modesty, but I don't get into all this. If women shouldn't wear wig or weave or or makeup, although I'm not for makeup, but again, I'm not one to always like, oh yeah, I need to tell you never under no circumstance, but there's these people that guys like to preach and tell these women this and tell these women that. And I'm like, I think you should lay off that topic a little bit. So when we look at this, you serpents, you generation of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell? So we have teenage boys going down to protest in the church that is most known for rape. Not by my opinion, just me saying what the news is. I have no skin in this game, so to speak. While there's millions of refugees being affected, and the Catholic Church itself is split. If you go to 10 Catholics, 40-something%, 4 of them are going to be definitely abortion under all circumstance, and 4 is going to be abortion under no circumstance, and then some of them are going to be probably like me, in the middle. It probably depends on the case. I'm not sure. That's what it is. But yet there's going to be like this type of stuff. But yet you're going to go there. No, we're protesting it. But as a church, you're split. And then the men at the top, which is to me where my issue is, the men at the top who have been accused consistently, not now the individual members in the Catholic Church, but the men at the top have a constant record of raping little kids. But they're the one. Those rapists are the ones going to tell me that they have the right call and they should say abortion is wrong while they're raping little kids. Imagine this grown man and a child and then saying, while he's on a child, shouting, oh, abortion is wrong. Arrange those young boys to go down to Washington and tell women that we shouldn't abort. So I can have more kids, I guess, to rape. So this is this type of stuff that's going on. So before I go to more text, let me go over here now. I'm not going over here anywhere. I'm just going to my next screen or my next window here. So I'm looking here at this thing now. I'm going to take 2 quick notes. Let's do it this way. So I'm gonna I have 3 little snippets here to read. So first thing here before I read the article of why they were there, taking 2 articles from USA Today, and it says, who knew Trump top White House attorney is Covington Catholic High School graduate? And it's written by Jason Williams. So I'm going to take 3 paragraphs here. So this is an article. The national firestorm surrounding Covington Catholic has brought to light that one of the greater Cincinnati High School's most prominent graduates happened to be President Donald Trump's top White House attorney. Pat Cipollone, which he graduated from Covington Catholic in 1984, recently took over as White House General Counsel. He had previously served as an informal advisor to the president on the special counsel investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. What does Cipollone's White House role has to do with last week's incident in Washington, D.C. involving the Covington Catholic students? Absolutely nothing. But it wasn't widely known that Trump had a top advisor directly connected to Covington Catholic, a greater Cincinnati, for whatever that matters. So just a quick little note that I saw that I thought was interesting. So here are these young men that's going to be the future advisor for the president. And the late article went on to say later on that he went to Fordham School in New York to get his, I think, his regular bachelor, and then he went on to law school in Chicago, and used to work with some guys that he later split from, that end up working. One of them ended up working for the President Barack Obama. So these are prominent men. Going back to what I was talking about earlier with the Catholic Church, these are prominent men who sit at the higher end of life, not touched or affected by what the regular folk has to be affected by, and they're making the rules. So just in case somebody was saying, well, it's, some of this stuff might be overstated. No, one of those kids probably will be a president of the United States one day, or will be men that are their guy here, Chipolone. Chipolone, he is now the primary lawyer that advises the president, and he graduated from Covington Catholic. So some of those boys, there were 200 boys protesting the women right to abortion. They're going to be men that are going to, some of them, there's a possibility that some of them are going to be advising the president, future president of the United States. They're going to be judges and lawyers and doctors and so forth. And they're going to fill in, some of them, the higher echelon of society. And I say this because of, it's not hypothetical. In reality, here you have the president advisor being a former alumni of Covenant, or a former graduate of Covington. So when we talk about this, this is not just any issue. It's a major issue. The young men were there, about 200 of them, could be more, and they were wearing red hats, some of them, which is the mega hat, Make America Great hat. That for some, it's just a hat that represents a campaign. For some, it's a hat that represents hate and tyranny. Depends on who you are. If you're probably evangelical, you see it as to benefit you. If you're black, you see it as against you. If you're Kanye West, you probably see it as for you, or it is profound, and it's a great thing. So this is why everything else going forward is important, because here you have these young men. They're protesting, and then they're being groomed. And what are they being groomed for? They're being groomed for leadership. But this idea here of children protesting women, this is what I find disturbing. Let me go to the next article real quickly, because of the sake of time, and I'm running out of it. In March, USA Today again, and this is written by two different people, Dan Horn, Kate Murphy, and Terry DeMille. The March for Life is a different kind of field trip for schools like Covington Catholic. The itinerary for most schools' field trip in Washington, D.C. is usually as busy as it's predictable. Seymour Monument on the Mall, check out Smithsonian Museum, and don't miss the bus for the next stop. But trips to the annual March for Life are different. They are not typical as different as Covington Catholic's school visit last week, which ended with the Park Hills, Kentucky school and its student embroiled in a made-for-Twitter political firestorm. But still, unlike the sightseeing excursion kids sign up for at most schools, the March for Life trip are built around student activism at the single event about a single issue on a single day in Washington. Catholic schools, where students are taught abortion is an intrinsic evil, have been organizing excursion to the anti-abortion marches for years. This has never been just another field trip for the students or their parents, chaperones, and abortion has never been just another issue in American cultural war. It's not designed to be a vacation, said Chris Knuckleman, who chaperoned the Covington Catholic trip to the march 2 years ago with his son. It's designed to be a mission. It's something special. The visit tend to be short, usually consisting of overnight bus ride, a rally, the march, and a long ride home. Students from some schools stay overnight, others arrive the morning of the march and ride home the same day. The field trip also tend to be less scripted than the days long guided tour that have become a rite of passage for many American high schools and middle school students. Those who have had a part of the March for Life trip, however, say that less scripted doesn't mean less organized or less supervised, and Covington Catholic chaperones have pushed back against criticism they didn't do enough to prevent the incident at the mall over the weekend. But given the widening divide in America politics and the ugliness that often spring from it, bringing students to the March for Life. And when they say March for Life, they're talking about marching against abortion, and they're pro-life. That means no removal of the fetus. Is more complicated, so no abortion. More complicated than it used to be. These students aren't just visiting the places where political debates occur. They are participating in debates. So it's almost like a practical field trip. The Diocese of Covington officially could not be reached for comments Tuesday. Over the weekend, they issued a statement saying they condemned the behavior of some of the students who appeared in the video posted online from the mall in Washington. These early videos showed Covington Catholic students, some wearing bright red Make America Great hats, around a Native American man who participated in the nearby Indigenous People March. Some of the students made chopping motion with their arms, laughing and chanting while the man, Nathan Phillips, beat his drum and sang. One student stood in front of Phillips, staring at him. Longer versions of the video later emerged that showed Phillips approaching the student as members of a group known as the Black Hebrew Israelite shouted insults, some of them sexual in nature, at the students. Phillips said he was trying to get between the groups to diffuse the tension. The earlier videos elicited outrage on social media from people who saw the boys as instigators trying to intimidate Phillips. Later videos brought a similar response from the boys' defenders who complained they have been set up or unfairly maligned. Back and forth quickly became part of the broader political and cultural fights rolling in the nation. The encounter wasn't about abortion, but the March of Life and the boys' red hat, which are symbols of Donald Trump presidential campaign, were lightning rods for both their critics and defenders on social media. One of the chaperones at the trip, Val Andreev, said adults who were with the students did everything they could to avoid trouble on the mall. He said participants didn't realize their experience at the mall had become a national outrage until they got home the next day and saw themselves all over the internet. There was nothing the chaperone could have done differently, said Andreev. I am proud the way the boys handled the situation. The Archdiocese of Cincinnati and the Diocese of Covington both leave planning for the field trip to the individual schools. The schools arrange transportation, round up chaperone volunteers, establish dress code, and set agenda for the students. As Diocese of Cincinnati spokesperson Mike Schaefer said, the Archdiocese recommend a student to chaperone ratio of no more than 10 to 1. So that means there should have been at least 20 adults. I just paused here a little bit because I watched the video and you could not see a 20 to 1 chaperone ratio. The same is true in Covington Catholic trips. This is in line with ratio of other school field trips according to the tour guide companies. The video shows few adults around the Covington students during the encounter, which is true, and none close to where Phillips was banging his drum, which is true again. Some can be heard later in the video telling students to move, which is true. The students and chaperones said they were waiting for a bus to pick them up after the march when they encounter a card. Tour guide company wouldn't say anything much about the incident. The company was out of New York City, and the Student and Youth Association says we used to build self-esteem and leadership skills, being responsible for yourself, traveling with groups. People look at this experience not to babysit the whole time. And bottom line, there's the one of the people here expect that the march will continue and the kids will continue with their mission trips to Washington to protest abortion. The idea is to participate in the march, he said. You can't be with students every second, every moment, but it was extremely well organized. So they say it was extremely well organized. End the article there. So I wanted to share that article with you because I wondering myself the question, what type of mission trip is, I'm calling it now mission trip. What kind of field trip is this? But it's a mission trip. The mission is to end abortion. So that's their mission trip. So that was that there, right? So the question then, why were the Covington Catholic High School boys protesting abortion in Washington, D.C.? The answer to that is part of their mission. Their mission is they're teaching them activism. And the way they're teaching them activism is to stop this. I think they say since abortion was legalized, the numbers are anywhere from 40-something million to 50-something million babies have been aborted in the United States. So that's a lot of people. That's like 20%. No, it's like probably 15% or so of the population, current living population in America. So this is the type of stuff, and many people believe, according to what I've read, that most of those are the white population that has been aborted, and so they're looking at it as, you know, the white in threat of not being the majority is in large part, I believe, connected to this abortion issue. So as I say, it's you know, I'm fine either way. I'm just taking in their information, try to process it. This is not one of those issues that I like get up every morning and say, this is my mission to stop this, or I'm not against it. To keep saying that, because that's just me talking honestly. I'm the March for Life or the March Against Life. I would watch both group. So before I get more into that talk again, looking at my time, I want to read for you a little snippet, because there's other things going on about life, not the ones that are being aborted, and that's a sad reality either way. But here's a quick little snippet that again talk about straining a gnat and swallowing a camel, that there's issues to be concerned with that are not their concern. Like, they're not doing this type of mission trip. So here's a mission trip. This is another article I'm going to share before I finish up this discussion. And I'm going to try to connect with them. So for aid, this is from USA Today. This was early in the week. 4 aid volunteers found guilty of dropping off food for migrants in Arizona desert. This is taken from Arizona Republic. This is a newspaper. And Rafael Carranza. A federal judge found 4 humanitarian aid volunteers guilty on some of the charges against them for dropping off water and food for migrants at a protected wilderness around along the Arizona-Mexico border. So they're going around along the border, dropping off water. Notorious for the number of human remains recovered. And there's another article I read, I think the week before, where there's groups that will go in and collect the bones and examine the bones and I guess bury the bones of dead migrants who are trying to make it into America, but die by illness or by exhaustion or by dehydration, most likely probably dehydration and sickness. So this has been a problem for the people trying to get into America. And this is why I'm reading this. So just in case you miss why I'm reading this, as I read the next few paragraphs, this is now to me, if you want to activism, do a bus trip down there and go drop water off and teach the kids to risk being arrested to help the poor. Remember, most of these people coming from South America are actually Catholics anyhow. U.S. Magistrate Judge Bernardo Velasco found Natalie Hoffman, a volunteer with humanitarian aid group No More Deaths, guilty on all 3 charges against her. He also found 3 other volunteers, Ona Holcomb, Madeline Huss, H-U-S-C, Huss, and Zailchila Orasco McCormick, guilty on 2 charges they each face. Hoffman have been charged with operating a vehicle inside the Cabeza Prieta National Wildlife Refuge in southwestern Arizona, entering without a permit and leaving behind 1-gallon water jugs and cans of beans. Hopefully a can opener also. The charges stem from, probably the beans that you can rip off the top. The charges stem from an encounter with a U.S. Fish and Wildlife officer at the Cabeza Prieta on August 13, 2017. The court found her 3 co-defendants, all passengers in the truck Hoffman was driving inside the refuge, guilty of entering the area without a permit and abandoning personal property. The defendants did not get an access permit. It's like getting a fishing permit and you're starving. They did not remain on the designated road and left water, food, and crates in the refuge. All of this, in addition to violating the law, erodes the national decision to maintain the refuge in its pristine nature, Velasco wrote in the 3-page order posted online Friday afternoon. In his decision, Velasco chastised No More Deaths for failing to warn 4 volunteers about the full consequence of violating the refuge regulations. He said all 4 had acted in a mistaken belief that a worst-case scenario for them could have been to get a citation or barred from the refuge. No one in charge of No More Deaths ever informed them that their conduct could be prosecuted as a criminal offense, nor did any of the defendants make any independent inquiry into the legality and consequence of their activity, he wrote. So that means the people who organize the organization No More Deaths did not inform them, and they didn't make any effort to try to find what's going to be the result if they get caught breaking the law, giving water, leaving water and canned food. As a matter of fact, somebody, one of these people I know who is anti-abortion, had posted a video where the agents, the government agents, would go into the desert, find water bottles, and puncture them, bore holes in them, so that and leak out all the water. So that's what the government agents are doing. Legality road. The court can only speculate, back to the article, as to what the defendant's decision would have been had they known the actual risk of their undertaking. So you don't know what they would have done. They probably would still do it, or they probably wouldn't. In a statement, Catherine Gaffney, a longtime volunteer with No More Deaths, criticized Friday's ruling, saying, "This verdict challenged not only No More Deaths volunteers, but people of conscience throughout the country. If giving water to someone dying of thirst is illegal, what humanity is left in the law of this country?" The U.S. Attorney Office in Arizona, which prosecuted the case, has not responded to requests for comments. Having been found guilty, each of the four women, so these are women again, not the men from Covington School, face up to 6 months in federal prison and $500 fines. No dates for sentencing has been set yet. And this person says she was just there to leave water. Continue reading here. It says the trial at the U.S. District Court in Tucson today and concluded after 3 days. Prosecutors with the U.S. Attorney Office in Arizona presented a factual approach, arguing the four women on trial admitted in court to having willingly violated the refuge regulations for which they were charged. The four volunteers testify in their defense that their activity, that they were part of a sincere held belief to help people in need. Orozco McCormick said she considered the work almost sacred and described being on the refuge as like being on a graveyard because of the number of migrants' deaths had taken place there. All four also explained that one reason none of them had obtained permit to enter Cabeza Prieta Center around language added to the agreement anyone seeking a permit requires to sign beforehand. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife added the paragraph in July 2017, a month before the incident for which they were cited. It specified that leaving behind food, water, medical supply, other aids in the refuge was not permitted. I was there to leave water, Huffman said. When asked why she didn't sign the document, so she said, look, I was there. She literally was there to leave water, in other words, and she's saying the document said you cannot leave water. Defense attorney also claimed that the federal government had singled out no more deaths, arguing that the volunteers for organization face many hurdles that other members of the public didn't. That includes special instruction for all wildlife officers to refer any member of the organization seeking a permit to a refuge manager, and to do not issue lists which contain names of certain volunteers who were not allowed to get a permit. So even if they went for a permit, they would still only get it, in other words. A few more paragraph here. Lawyers, and as I say, I'm reading this and I hope I don't have to, because I'm running out of time, so I hope you get this. Because remember, those boys went on a mission trip and their mission was to protest. We don't know how much of those boys were going to be rapists in the future. We don't know how much of them are going to be Supreme Court judge like Judge Kavanaugh. We don't know how much of them are going to be advisor to the president. We don't know what their lives are going to turn out. But at their young, tender age, they already know that no abortion under any circumstance. While here's four women now, the same type of women that they're protesting, are there. I don't know if these women are pro-abortion or anti-abortion. Neither am I. But these women are here risking federal prison sentences to give water to live birth. People who actually made it through the birthing process and didn't die of starvation or being aborted. Giving them water and medicine and food, and they're being prosecuted. So the refugees are dying in the refuge, and the activists who are going to give them water so they don't die are being prosecuted to protect the pristine refuge that the refugees are dying in. I think the irony is just unreal here. So we are protecting pristine land over life. And those same people who are passing those rules, we go protest abortion. Notice here, prosecutor dismissed those arguments, countering that no written or oral agreement between the U.S. Attorney Office to not prosecute these cases existed. No one in the U.S. Border Patrol testified in court, but the agency activity along Cabeza Prieta played a significant role in the trial. Testimony from both sides highlighted the rising tension between humanitarian aid groups like No More Deaths and the Border Patrol. Although several areas in Cabeza Prieta are restricted to the public and aid volunteers, defense attorney pointed out the Border Patrol agents regularly drive through the area of the refuge. Prosecutors argued that the 10 rescue beacons that the Border Patrol installed inside the refuge was preferred way to save lives rather than dropping off water drugs and give false hope to migrants. Assistant Attorney General Nathaniel Walters said. Defense attorney responded that access to the beacons was key and that migrants who were dehydrated might not be able to get to them. What was not discussed during the trials were the accusation from No More Deaths that Border Patrol agents systematically destroy and empty water bottles they leave behind for migrants in the desert. That's something I've seen videos of. So I've seen the videos. If you go online, you can search the videos. You'll see videos of Border Patrol agent bursting the water bottles so that if the migrants come and find them, they just see water bottles. That's really, like, just to me, wicked. The guilty verdict for the first of its kind under the administration of President Donald Trump was advocated for stricter immigration and border enforcement. 5 other volunteers with No More Deaths face unrelated charges for similar activities on Cabeza Prieta. Their trial are scheduled to begin in the next 2 months in Tucson. One of their volunteers is Scott Warren, who faced a separate trial in connection to felony arrest in February 2018 on charge of harboring undocumented immigrants. Friday verdict is the first conviction against humanitarian aid volunteers along the U.S. border since 2009. When federal judge found another No More Deaths volunteer guilty of littering for dropping off water jugs at the Buenos Aires National Wildlife Refuge, all these beautiful wildlife refuge for the wildlife. A year before, Dan Millis was found guilty of littering on Buenos Aires Refuge. However, the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals overturned his conviction. Other charges brought against humanitarian aid groups and volunteers mostly have been dismissed. So this is what's happening right now. So here you have an action where men are going, and women, primarily women here, are going to help people who are dying. Literally, if you go and search, you see how many remains have been collected. I think over 120 something remains have been collected in these areas where people are literally just dying, trying to make it to America, coming from country where America has controlled their economic and welfare and overturning their government and putting military rule. And these people are coming over and they're dying. And so instead of going there and say, hey, let's do a field trip down there and let's get some of you all arrested, you young men arrested, and then that would be real activism to help our fellow Catholics that are coming across the border. And I'm not for helping fellow Catholics or Baptists or Adventists or anybody come across the border. I'm just reading the news and observing how life is straight at a gnat and swallowing a camel. We can go to Washington, do a beautiful field trip, and run into some trouble trying to tell women that they should not commit abortion. That's what I find fascinating. And there's more I could have said, but you know how it goes. I ran out of time. And so as we see this happening, we see that I'm out of time and I can't say no more. And that's the problem with sometimes trying to delve into topics like this. It becomes so big. So you get the point. Real activism is going on. Real, people are literally dying of hunger, starvation, poverty, fleeing from their country, military rule, needing a place of refuge. And people are willing to go into a refuge area to leave water. Have people who believe that they have moral stance are going in, bursting those water jugs, arresting those people, prosecuting them, and want to lock them up. For that activism, this to me is how life has its weirdness. and how people can have some false equivalence of what makes morality. And to me, the people who are alive, take care of them. Help the poor, help the fatherless, help the widow, help the sick, help those who are strangers, those who are immigrants, help the foreigners, help people who are less fortunate. But instead, we have people who are going to be the next attorney general and the next counsel to the president, who rich and increase with good and have needs of nothing, telling the rest of us who are suffering what to do and what not to do. I have major problem with that, and I believe, at least in my mind, that God does not side with all this evil that's going on. God side with the poor, and I think it's always best to side with the poor and less fortunate. This is where I'm at. Let's pray. Our Father who art in heaven, I thank you for your blessing. I thank you, dear Lord, that you're the God that looks after the poor, the fatherless, the widow, those that are less fortunate. And I'd send your Son to come and live, dear Lord, the life of the poor, the fortunate, the unfortunate, and the minority amongst us. May you bless us, dear Lord, that we might be like your Son and love those who your Son loved. This is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you again tomorrow morning, where we should talk about wisdom for living. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.